Melissa, welcome back to the podcast. How you doing?
I am so good. Thank you so much for having me again. I'm so excited to be here. I always love chatting to you.
We're going to have a great chat. This is number 3. A lot has changed in both our lives since we last connected. I was just mentioning before we jumped on the call, I have a relatively new daughter who's just over a year old. And I know you're pregnant and ready to leave on your maternity leave. So congrats to you and Nick, and just so excited for you guys.
Yes. Yeah, this is really exciting and such a beautiful next chapter of my life.
Wow. It's how far along are you guys?
We have got a couple of weeks to go, so I'm around 34.
Wow. Getting close, and how have you been feeling throughout?
So good. So good. I had a little bit of nausea, like around week 5 to 12, a little bit nauseous, which is so interesting. Like it's like nothing you've ever experienced before. And then it goes, and then you feel amazing. And then the third trimester, you feel a little bit more, just need to rest a lot more, which is beautiful. It's the body just telling you to slow down, to go inward, to look after yourself, to up your self care, to up your self love, and get you ready for this babe coming earthside.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting for you and other female entrepreneurs because I know, yeah, you do so much. You're podcasting, and this is your third book, and you do speaking gigs, and you have so much going on for such a long period of time. How has that transition to slowing down been for you? Was that a challenge?
No, because I was so ready for it. Like I really wanted this. I really wanted this next chapter of my life. I was so ready. And I often think about people who have fall pregnant when they're not planning it, and they have those oopsies, so like we're pregnant, and they're not mentally prepared. And I have lots of friends that's happened to, and then they struggle with really shifting from, maybe they had this idea of like wanting to create this business or do something within their work, and then now they have to shift gears, and they really do struggle with that shift. And so that was definitely not the case for me, because I was so ready. Like I really wanted this, and so I've just embraced it, and slowing down has been beautiful. And I'm so excited for this rite of passage and this next phase in my life.
And do you have plans to slow down with the podcast and different, speaking things like that? I'm assuming you're at least taking a little bit of time, but what's the plan for the upcoming year?
Definitely taking some time to slow down for sure. So I am launching this book at the same time as giving birth, which is just so amazing. So my third book, like you said, Comparisonitis, comes out May 5th. So I'm not sure when this is going to air, but it's out May 5th, 2021. And it's really exciting. This book is about how to stop comparing yourself to others and be genuinely happy. And I think the reason why they are happening at a very similar time is because it's forcing me to practice surrender and trust. In the past, when I've launched books, I've done book tours around Australia and America, and done podcast tours, and I won't be able to do that. Well, I mean, I could, but I am choosing not to, because I want to be fully present with my babe and to slow down. And so there's a lot of surrender and trust that this book will get into the hands of the people that it needs to get into, and help the people that it needs to help. So, um, yeah, there's a lot of surrender and a lot of trust. And then I've got my podcast, which I have got a backlog of episodes already recorded, which is very handy, very, very handy. And I will be rolling those out whilst I am on maternity leave. So I'm giving myself like a forced maternity leave. And then if anything comes up, my husband can jump in and pretend to be me for a while.
Well, it's an honor to have one of your last interviews before you take that break. And I'm just so happy for you to know that you plan this and have everything in place to be able to be present and enjoy that experience to the fullest.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
And it's interesting because the timing with this book coming out and the baby being so close, you talk about this throughout the book where you had written a good portion of this book and then gotten pregnant. So things like getting pregnant, we can't always, time that to fit perfectly into our lives. And part of your story with Nick is you guys wanted to get pregnant and were trying for some time before you finally got pregnant. So I think this is a relatively common issue that isn't talked about enough. Are you comfortable sharing what your experience was like and what that journey took you through?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I share it in the book and without giving too much away, so people go and read the book because it's such a great story. But yeah, we were consciously conceiving for about 18 months before it happened. And it was a really challenging time. And my comparisonitis was the worst it's ever been. I talk about in the book, I've dealt with comparisonitis in, most of my life. I was a professional dancer and actress and TV presenter. And I was in an industry where it was constantly comparing to other people. You were getting compared to other people openly and in front of other people. So I grew up in that industry. And then social media comes along, and it's just such a ripe environment for comparisonitis to really breed. And everyone compares themselves to each other. Like we all do it, it's innate within us. However, it has gotten to really toxic levels. And we know this through the data because anxiety is through the roof, panic attacks through the roof. Depression and suicide or suicidal thoughts. And a couple of years ago, I lost a girlfriend to suicide, and it was a really challenging time in my life. And I think back to what she dealt with, depression and anxiety, and where that all stemmed from for her. And I think the reason why we need to talk about comparisonitis now is because it's becoming so common, and we need to heal it within ourselves first so that we can help the future generations. Like I think about my daughter, and I'm sure you think about yours too, and you think you don't want them to compare themselves to other people. Like you want them to know how amazing they are and how beautiful and whole and complete they are just as they are. Like they don't need to do anything. They don't need to be anyone or try and be anything. They're just a miracle just because. And we all are. We all truly are. So we don't need to compare ourselves. Like we really don't. And when you know who you truly are and when you know that you are a miracle, you stop comparing yourself. And there's 1 in 400 trillion chances that you were born. Like your parents got together, the egg, the sperm came together. 1 in 400 trillion. That is a lot, right? And that is a miracle. That is a pure miracle. And the book is about radical self love. It's about I give you so many tools and tips and tricks and strategies on how to heal your comparisonitis so that you can stop literally comparing yourself to anyone else and to find that inner peace and contentment from deep within. Stop looking outside of ourselves for happiness and find that within ourselves. And it's a book that every single person will get so much out of, no matter where you are on your journey, no matter what age you are, what sex you are, you will get so much out of this book. And, I wrote it because I was suffering so badly with comparisonitis. Like I write, most of my books is what I'm going through. And like you mentioned before, I was really suffering very badly with comparisonitis when it came to trying to get pregnant. I had so many of my girlfriends around me getting pregnant, and it just was such a challenging time for me to go through. It was really hard. I was questioning everything, like what is wrong with me? Is it my relationship? Like what I thought about everything, and then I realized that it was not about me, and it was about a deeper spiritual lesson in surrender and trust and letting go of control. and healing my comparisonitis. And I went on that journey, and then I got pregnant, which is just so beautiful. So it forced me to do a lot of internal work, which was beautiful and stretching at the same time.
Well, practically take us through how you dealt with that as somebody who is, you know, in those years where pregnancy is quite common. I'm sure you saw a lot of friends as you were trying to get pregnant. You mentioned 18 months, it's a long time. What did you do practically to handle that situation and be there and be supportive as friends got pregnant and keep your, your positivity? And obviously you're trying to get pregnant. You want to keep this a whole positive, sacred experience as well. How do you keep your head on straight?
Mm. In the book, I talk about a little technique. I've got so many techniques and so many strategies and so many different things that can help you in this case. There is one that I absolutely love and I'd love to share with you. It's called the ACEs technique. And basically, this technique is something that really, really helped me on my journey. And I created it and started using it, and it really helped me. And ACEs stands for, it's an acronym. A stands for awareness. And this is all about becoming aware of where we're comparing and what our triggers are. So for me, in the book, I share about how I was comparing myself to all of these other women in my life and then on social media who were getting pregnant very easily, first time, and constantly comparing myself. And maybe you compare yourself to other people's bodies or careers or their material items, their car, their house, their children, whatever it is. And so we need to become aware, like we need to actually shine light on the areas that we're comparing to other people and know what your triggers are. Like know, is it social media? Is it a particular relative? And when you hang out with them, you spiral into comparisonitis. So awareness is key. Awareness is actually key for all inner transformation, everything. Okay, so that's the first step in the ACEs technique. The second step, C, stands for choose a different path. So every opportunity, every moment, every second of every day, we are making choices. And we can make choices from fear and we can make choices from love. And we want to be conscious about what choice we are making. And if we are choosing to compare and then go down that comparisonitis spiral, that is a choice that we are making. And if we don't like that choice, we can choose something different. We can choose to feel light. We can choose to feel love. We can choose to feel abundant, whatever it is. So choose a different path. Like if you are aware that you're comparing yourself to someone over your career or getting pregnant or your body or whatever it is, choose a different path. Like consciously say to yourself, I can see where this is going, but instead today I'm going to choose a different path and I'm not going to spiral down into that comparisonitis. And then the third step, E, stands for eliminate the trigger, or you can either exit the situation or exhale. And I'll explain all three of those to you. So we want to, like I said in the first step, A, awareness, you need to become aware of what your triggers are and you can eliminate those triggers. So say it's a particular situation that really in the past has been conducive for you to spiral into a comparisonitis trap. Instead, you can just eliminate that trigger, remove it. If a trigger is social media, if a trigger is watching a particular movie with a particular celebrity, or work out what your triggers are and then you can eliminate them. Or you could exit the situation. So say a trigger might be all of your girlfriends sitting around a table talking about their latest dates and things like that, and you've just broken up with someone, and you're feeling really tender, your heart is a bit tender, and everyone around the table is talking about their successful dates. Like you can just remove yourself and go to the bathroom and get some fresh air and just take a breather. Like you can remove yourself from the situation. Or you could exhale. So in a situation where I had to exhale was when my best friend told me she was pregnant, sitting across the table from me. I couldn't eliminate that trigger. I can't get rid of her. And I couldn't exit the situation because it's just me and her and I can't just walk away. So I decided to just exhale, where I just took in a really deep breath and I exhaled. And I just decided to come back to the present moment and get out of my head. And instantly I felt better. And so that is the third step. You can eliminate the trigger, you can exit the situation, or you can exhale. And this isn't about spiritually bypassing how you're feeling. This is literally about giving yourself some room and space to breathe so that you can recalibrate your thoughts, come back to the present moment, and then move forward. So that is the third step. And then the fourth step, S stands for shift your state. So Tony Robbins talks a lot about this. He talks about changing your state. And often when we are in a comparisonitis spiral, we have quite a particular energy about us. Maybe we feel, our shoulders are hunched forward. Maybe we feel like our heart is closed off. We might feel a bit funky. And to shift that energy and to raise the vibration in your body, you can do things like dancing or jumping up and down or doing some star jumps or squats or shaking out your body, whatever it is. And it really is, a matter of just a couple of seconds. You can do that, if you're at work and someone's triggered you to compare yourself. You can go to the bathroom, go to a boardroom, go to a bedroom, and just take a couple of moments to consciously raise your vibration in your body, raise your energy. And that is the 4-step technique. So it's the ACEs technique: become aware, choose a different path, eliminate the trigger, and shift your state. And that is literally what I do whenever I find myself in a comparisonitis spiral, and it works. And that's what one of the techniques I share in the book.
That's great. And Melissa, how do we know? Well, first of all, is comparison ever a good thing? And if it is, how do we know when it gets to that point when it becomes unhealthy?
That's a really good question. So there is healthy comparison and then there's toxic comparison. And in the book, I talk about there's upward comparison and downward comparison. And so basically, like for as long as we can remember, we've compared ourselves. We were cavemen and we would compare how other people are reacting to things. And when we'd look around and we look to other people to see how we can respond. And it can definitely be a motivator. For example, if you're at the gym running on the treadmill and someone jumps on the treadmill next to you and they crank up the incline and crank up the speed, and they're the same sort of age as you, they're the same sort of body shape as you, and you kind of look to them and you think, oh, maybe I could go a bit faster. Like they're going pretty fast and they seem to be doing really well, and maybe I could go a bit faster. And then, you crank up the speed and you crank up the incline. You've compared yourself and you crank yours up, and then you finish your workout and you're like, wow, I'm really proud of myself. Like I proved to myself that I could go a little bit harder and I didn't think I could. That's an example of like a healthy comparison, right? And another one would be, say you're new in a work environment, in a workspace, and you don't, you've just met your boss and you don't know how to be in relation with that person yet because you don't know what they're like. Like, are they going to get annoyed that I'm 1 minute late? Are they going to get annoyed if I look at my phone in the meeting? Or are they cool with that? Like, are they super chill? And so you can kind of compare and look around and go, well, how is everyone else reacting in relation to that person? And you can gauge and change your behavior in accordance to that data that you've just received. So they're like some examples of some healthier comparisons. it turns toxic and it becomes comparisonitis when we compare ourselves and then we attribute meaning to it and we make it mean something negative about ourselves. So there's so and so on Instagram on yet another European holiday. We never go on holidays. My life is, boring and we can't afford it or whatever. And then you spiral into that comparisonitis, that unhealthy comparisonitis. That is what we need to look at. That's what we need to address. That's what we need to become aware of, and look at. Because if we don't do it now, we're going to pass it on to our children, or it's just going to metastasize within ourselves and get worse and worse and eat away at us, which is not what we want, and social media isn't going anywhere. There's more and more platforms. There's more and more time we're spending online. The data shows that in a lifetime, we spend about 6 years of our life on social media, 10 years in total on our phone. So then I'm talking consistently, like 6 full years, 24/7, and 10 full years, 24/7, looking at your phone, holding your phone. And I just think, wow, that is wild. What could we do with that time? And a lot of it is just scrolling and comparing, and it's just unnecessary, and it causes a lot of mental health issues, like I've mentioned before. And we just don't need to do it. Life is so precious, it's so sacred, it's so beautiful, and we don't need to waste any of our precious time or energy comparing ourselves to anyone else, because the truth is, like, we are a miracle. We are magical, and we don't need to waste our time comparing. And when you truly know that, like when you truly know that you are a miracle, you won't compare yourself to someone else.
So at the core of all of this, is that kind of the message we're looking to, embrace and take away from this conversation if we had to sum it all up in one concise form?
Yes, exactly.
And you mentioned there, I want to talk about social media, but you also talked about passing it on to our kids. And you're a stepmom. I think your stepson is entering into about the teen years, or is an early teen. And I mentioned my daughter just being 1 year old, and you're about to have another baby. Let's get into this. Let's talk about, as parents who are aware of this and hopefully making changes in our own lives to not compare in a healthy way. How do we go about setting our kids up for success in this manner? Hopefully they don't have to go down the road to the point that a lot of us as adults do. As aware parents, what can we do for our kids?
It all starts with us, like with anything. Like if we want to not compare, if we want our children not to compare, then we have to not compare. If we want our children to eat well, we have to eat well. If we want our children to not swear, we have to not swear. So it all comes back to us. Like we have to embody our values and our beliefs. And that's how children learn, by watching, by observing, not by being told to eat their broccoli if their parents aren't eating their broccoli. They learn by watching their parents eat their broccoli. So we firstly have to embody what it is that we believe in. And we have to, so in terms of comparisonitis, we have to embody uh, self-love. We have to show them that we are amazing, and I share a story in the book about one of my friends and her daughter who walked into her room. She was about 9 years old, and she walks into her mum's room, and she's just got like underwear on, and she's pinching her belly, and she says, "Mum, am I fat?" And her mum says, "Darling, no, not at all. Why would you say that? Why would you say that?" And she said, "Well, whenever you look at Instagram, you always say, 'Oh, your belly looks so fat.' And then when you walk past the mirror, you always say, 'Oh, I'm so fat, my belly fat. I need to do something about my belly fat.' And everyone says that I look like you. So I think, well, maybe I'm fat too." And my friend's jaw just hit the floor. She was like, "Oh my goodness, what have I done? And she realized that her daughter was just copying exactly what she was doing. And this was a really big realization for her. And so remembering that children learn by watching us, they're following, they're copying everything that we do. So it's really important that if we want to raise body confident, self confident, well adjusted, human beings, then we have to be that ourselves. It's so important. That's like the biggest thing.
That makes sense. And you mentioned how comparisonitis was something that you struggle with over the years. How far along your journey, when along your journey specifically, did you realize that you had a problem with this? And then how did you go about unraveling it and start to deeply love yourself and work yourself out of that hole?
My gosh, it's been a journey. It really kicked off for me when I was I've done it for as long as I can remember. I remember being in primary school and comparing myself. I remember thinking, why don't I like the same things the other girls like? Why don't I love netball like the other girls love netball? I don't fit in. I don't fit in, and I loved dancing and performing, and there was just me and one other girl that liked doing that, but everyone else liked netball and sport. And I did it, but I was like, but why? Why can't I be like them? Why can't I look like them? Why can't, and I'd want to be like them. The girls that got the attention from the boys, why can't I be like them? So it started in primary school, and then it exacerbated in high school. And then when I moved to Paris, when I was 20 years old, I was dancing at the Moulin Rouge in Paris for a year. That's when it got really severe, really bad. And that's when I realized that this isn't really normal. It's not ideal, but I didn't do anything about it. I just kept on going. I just kept on trying to shrink my body to look like other people. I just kept on pushing. And it wasn't until 2010 when I hit rock bottom, which we've spoken about before, and I ended up in hospital. And that's when I realized that the way I was living my life, my beliefs, everything needed to change. That was my rock bottom moment for me in hospital, with a whole host of physical health issues and also mental health issues from depression and anxiety and panic attacks. So that was kind of like my light bulb, something needs to shift. And from there, that's when I started to become aware of these negative, toxic habits and thoughts and beliefs that I had, and made it my absolute mission to work on them, to heal them, because I realized that we're here on earth to evolve and to grow. That's why we're here. And I could either take the path of ignorance and close all the textbooks and never learn and grow and just live this simple unconscious life, or I could dive headfirst. And I chose to dive headfirst into it and became obsessed with psychology and understanding why we do the things we do in human behavior and spirituality. And I just dove headfirst into it all. And I'm still on that journey, and I'm going to be for the rest of my life. I'm committed to growing. I'm committed to learning. I'm committed to being the best version of myself and unlocking my full potential and supporting myself along this path.
And Melissa, what do you think it is about you when you hit rock bottom that you decided to pivot and grow from that situation rather than wallow and maybe even fall deeper into the mental health issues and stuff like that? Was it something that's in your genes? Was there somebody that, you connected with at the right time that kind of pushed you and nudged you in the right direction? What brought you out of that?
I think a combination of things, the biggest one being I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was so over it. I was so exhausted. I had completely just like hands in the air. I'm like, I'm done. Like, I'm done suffering. I was so exhausted from suffering. And I thought, surely God didn't put me here on earth to suffer. Surely He didn't say, I'm going to put Melissa Ambrosini on earth to suffer. Like, surely that wasn't His intention. And yes, there was, I did meet some people around that time just before I ended up in hospital. I started this thing called yoga and meditation, and I just attended like my first couple of classes. And um, no, I'd done yoga before that. I'd definitely done yoga before that, but I'd started Kundalini yoga just before that. And I'd met these couple of people who became my friends, and they showed me that there was another way to live. And I'd never been exposed to this before, like this healthy way to live where, they were drinking green smoothies and they were happy, and they spoke about abundance, and they told each other they loved each other, and they meditated and they did yoga. And I was like, what is this world? Like, I'd only known a world of cocktails and late nights and partying. And I was like, wow, I could have friends that don't do that. Like, this is amazing. So I was exposed to that. And then in hospital, one of those people that I just met previously, like a few months before, gave me a book that changed my life, and that was Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life. And I read that book and just light bulbs went off, and I thought, oh my goodness, how have I not known this before? And I knew in that moment that I wanted to write a book that had that same impact on people. And it's so beautiful because I share that in my first book, Mastering Your Mean Girl. And people come up to me and they say, your book was my Louise Hay. And I think, oh, wow, that's just so beautiful and so powerful. So yeah, there was a combination of things. Those couple of things, like just being so tired of suffering and having those people that showed me there was another way to live, and that book, and a willingness and a determination within myself. I was just ready. And I also think my parents, my dad is an entrepreneur, and he's people say to me, how have you achieved all that you've achieved in your life? You've achieved so many things. You're so organized. You're so determined. Like, how have you done it all? And it is that part of me is in my genes. It's not something I've ever struggled with. I have friends that just really struggle with getting organized and getting things done and writing that first ebook. And they look at me and they think, you just wrote a book in a month? Like, what the hell? And I think for me, it's just always been in my genes. In Ayurveda, I'm a pitter, and in human design, I'm a generator, which is like that go-getting type of personality. So I had that within me as well.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about somebody reaching out to you and saying that your book was like the Louise Hay book for you, because you share in the opening of your book a story about writing a different book than the one we're talking about today. You got 6 months into that and had to pitch it. So let's talk about that story and what direction were you headed? That's a lot of work. 6 months of focused work. Again, you're busy, you have a lot of things going on. Let's talk, because again, you do have a lot going for you, and you have so much success, but you still have challenges, and I think this makes you more human sharing stuff like this. So let's talk about the book.
Oh my gosh, totally. So my husband and I were actually writing a book together, and we were 80,000 words in. And then we decided this isn't the next book. And we had a book deal. So we had contracts written up. Everything was signed, sealed, and delivered. And I literally woke up and I was like, this isn't the next book. This is an amazing book, but it's not the next book. It's just something within me, my intuition was like, this isn't it. And then I had an experience, which I share in the start of the book, about me comparing myself to someone else. and then realizing that there was other people comparing themselves to me. And I just had this realization that we're all just comparing ourselves to everyone. And that's when I realized that this is this is the next message that needs to come through for me. And I wrote it in 2 months. I wrote the book. It just came through. And it's interesting because the other book that Nick and I were writing together, it wasn't as flowing as much as all of my other books that I have written. They just flow. Like I wrote Mastering Your Mean Girl in 2 weeks. I wrote Open Wide in a month. I wrote Purposeful in a month. This book I took a little bit longer because there was a lot of science and, I was looking at the data on anxiety and depression and things like that and suicide. So there was it took a little bit longer, but it flowed really effortlessly. And yeah, I mean, who knows? We might release that book later, or we might turn it into an online program or something like that. But it never goes to waste, of course. But yeah, we sunk like 6 months and 80,000 words into that book, and we're almost done. And it just didn't feel right. My intuition was like, this isn't it. This is not the next one.
So you're not sure at this point, it sounds like, if that book's been shelved for now and to be determined what it might be used for.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we will definitely do something with it, but not sure when, and not sure whether it will be a book or whether it will be an online program that we might create together. But yeah, it was incredible content. So we'll see what happens with it.
You went over the story after scrapping the book quickly there. I want to go a bit deeper into this. You talk about it again in the book and how you're on the toilet one Monday morning and you're scrolling on your phone and you see somebody that you follow who had just hit the #1 New York Times bestseller position for the 3rd time. I don't know if you can tell us who it is or not, but that's up to you. But talk about the feeling you had at that time. You'd already put out 2 books and have all this success, but you're still comparing, which leads us to believe that even the people that are quote unquote at the very top must have other people they're comparing themselves to. But can you talk more about yourself I know it's a bit private on the toilet, but take us through what went on there.
Totally. And I talk about taking our phone to the toilet in the book and why we need to stop doing that. I know everyone's probably like, yep, I'm guilty. Everybody does it. And it's just like, why do we do it? Like, why do we not just allow ourselves a couple of minutes of peace to just be? And, that's something that I address in the book and why that is detrimental to our health and to our life. So that's something I touch on in the book. But yes, I do talk about this story where I'm sitting on the toilet, scrolling Instagram, and come across this incredible author that I follow who has hit the New York Times list for the 3rd time. And yes, all of my books have been bestsellers. And here I am comparing myself. Like, why is my book not a New York Times bestseller? Like, what's going on? And I started to feel really down about myself. Like I started to spiral into that comparisonitis slippery slope. I started to go down that slope. And then, anyway, sat there for a while and felt really crappy about myself and beating myself up. My inner mean girl was saying the most awful things to me. You're not good enough and your books will never be a New York Times bestseller. And anyway, I sat there for a while and got up and went upstairs to where my office is and opened my computer. And there was an email in my inbox from a beautiful girl called Kathy. And she had sent me an email saying how much she loves my work and how much my books have inspired her and my podcast and my programs and just how much I've changed her life. And I was so touched. And then she, proceeded to tell me that she's writing her first book. And she told me a little bit about her book. And she said, do you have any advice? I can't stop comparing myself to you. I want to write books as good as you. And I want them to be bestsellers like you. And do you have any advice for me? And I just like hand on my face plant. I was like, here I am comparing myself to someone else. And here's Kathy comparing herself to me in the exact same moment. And then I had this realization, we're all just comparing ourselves to everyone else. It's like this cycle, but it needs to stop. It's unhealthy and we need to stay in our own lane. I talk about this in the book. We need to stay in our own lane, put our blinkers on, and do what feels true for us. I think social media is an amazing tool to allow us to connect and get inspiration and things like that. But it also, if you're not aware, it can be that slippery slope toward comparisonitis. So we need to become aware of it. And yeah, we need to stay in our own lane and do what feels true and right for us. Put those blinkers on and stop looking left and right to see what everyone else is doing, and stop trying to keep up with everybody else, and just stay in our own lane on our own path. So yeah, that story, yes, lots of people comment on that story and how they can relate to that.
It's a good one. I'm glad you got into the details. Can you share who the author was that you're looking at?
I'd prefer not to.
Okay, no problem. I had to ask. So let's come back to social media. This is something that keeps coming up in our conversation. And it's a territory that lends itself perfectly to comparisonitis. I mean, we're looking at other people's feeds, and generally these are pictures that have been, handpicked and then filters put over them, and captions underneath that have been carefully curated. So let's talk about social media and how we can go about using it in a healthy way, if that's possible, and how writing this book maybe has changed your perspective on social media and how you go about using yours.
Yeah, so I talk a lot about this in the book, and I give so many different strategies on how to. There's a whole chapter called scroll therapy, and it's really about how to change your relationship with it so that you have a healthy relationship. I call it like a new way, an upgraded way to do social media. And there's so many different things that you can do. And I'll give you just a couple of them because we'll be here forever if I give you all of them. But, one thing that you can do is set healthy boundaries for yourself. So I think the first thing you need to do is look at on your phone how much time you're spending on social media a day. So know your numbers. I talk about this in the book. Know your numbers. Like, how much time are you spending on social media a day? And then look at that and ask yourself, am I happy with that? Am I happy with an hour a day? Am I happy with 4 hours a day? And be really honest with yourself. I actually share in the book how I asked my friends and family this question. And when I got them to look at their numbers, they were all so shocked. They thought, oh my gosh, that's a lot of time. And then later I went back and asked them if they'd done anything about it, and they'd all said no, which is interesting. They were shocked with the numbers, yet they still did nothing about it. So it's like, what is that stops you from moving forward? Is it addiction? What is it? So these are some questions that you can ask yourself. So the first thing to do is like know your numbers, look at your numbers and ask yourself, am I happy with spending however long a day on social media? If the answer is yes, then great, cool. If the answer is no, then what are you going to do about it? Then I go into what you can do if your answer is no. So you can set some healthy boundaries for yourself. You can put a time limit. Most smartphones allow you to do that, where you can set time limits for specific apps, which is amazing. So whether it's like 45 minutes or 40 minutes per social media, or just for social media in general. And then it will give you a warning and say, you've hit your limit for today. I think that's really a great thing to do, just so you're aware of how much time you're spending on there. So that's really, really important that we look at that. Another thing to do is to not measure your self-worth by your likes and your comments and your followers. I think a lot of people get so down about likes and follows and comments and, oh, this image didn't get that. And I think when you are posting, and this is what's really important is like understand where you're posting from. Like, what is your intention? Are you posting because you want to share from your heart, or are you posting to get likes, to get comments, to get follows? And if you post from that place, you'll most likely be disappointed with the result. But if you post because you genuinely, often it's my posts that I write off the cuff and post a photo and I put it up quite quickly that gets the most comments and likes and traction and goes viral, compared to the ones with the perfectly curated, copy that I've spent ages curating, and the professional photo. It's so interesting. And, it's really important that we look at the place where we're posting from. That's really important. Taking regular vacations as well from like digital detoxes is really important. I do social media free Sundays where I do not open the apps unless I'm in the middle of a launch and it's quite important that I have to post on that day. So I try not to, otherwise, if I'm not in a launch, I won't open social media on a Sunday. And then I try and have a couple of holidays during the year where there's no social media, or I'll go camping where there's no phone reception, which is awesome. So doing little things like that is really helpful for your mental health. And remembering, I talk about this in the book, the highlights hypothesis, which is about remembering that social media is everyone's highlight reel. Unless someone is live streaming 24/7, then you're not getting the totality of their life. You're not getting the full scope of what's actually going on in their life. And so you can't really make assumptions about that person in their life. So you're just seeing the highlights. You're just seeing a smidge, like a snippet of their life, on stories and on their social media. So you don't know what's going on. And it's really important to remember that this is their highlight reel. It's their portfolio, for a lot of people, for influencers, think of it like an architect. They would have a portfolio or a resume. And that's what a lot of people use social media for these days. So that's another thing you can think about. And also, when you're looking at social media, it's I used to think social media was a neutral tool, and it was our intention that made it either positive or negative, but it's actually not a neutral tool. Like, these companies they monopolize on our attention. So they use the same tactics as casinos to keep you on their platform for as long as possible. And so we need to become aware of that and to make sure our habits are healthy and in alignment with what feels good and true for us. And another thing that can really help you with social media is remembering to zoom out. You're not seeing the totality of what's actually going on behind that photo. I share another story in the book about when we're in Greece, and Nick, I had to shoot some content for some brands that I was working with at that time. And we were shooting this beautiful image in Santorini. And there's me on this, the cliff with the white rooftops and the beautiful Mediterranean blue and blue water and the blue sky. And it's just the most stunning day and stunning image. And behind the photo, you can't see my, at the time, 11-year-old cranky stepson. I call him my bonus son, so over it, so tired, so hungry, so ready to go, and then you can't see my husband, who's also so over it and so hungry and wanting to go as well, and all the clothes everywhere. Like, you don't see that stuff yet. And a majority of us may be aware of this, but yet we forget it, and we like to trick ourselves and think that we're still looking at these picture perfect images and that their life is perfect. But it's just our inner critic that's telling us that, oh, their life is better than yours and their life is perfect, when really, which forces us to compare, when really, like, we're all one. We're all the same. We all have the same things, different degrees, of course, but we're all human and we all experience the same emotions and frustrations and joys. And we need to remember that, no one's life is picture perfect. And I want to encourage everyone listening to delete the word perfect and perfection from your vocabulary, because they don't exist, and they're just words that cause your inner critic to compare you to everyone else, and it's detrimental to your physical health and your mental health.
I'm glad you shared the Greece story. I was going to go there. I'm curious, how common of a scenario is that for you and your family? Is that something that happens from time to time, or is that kind of a one-off thing?
No, Nick and I have a joke that anytime we have to shoot content, either video or photo, we're like, all right, get the lawyer. Like, we'll get the lawyer. We're going to get divorced. And we joke about it all the time. And then, we're aware of it and we laugh about it. We were filming some content, and the videographer, who's actually now become a really good friend of ours, we laugh. We're like, you're going to see a very interesting side to both of us when we film stuff together. Like, we warned her, when we film stuff together, we just like, why did you say it like that? Like, we just get so funny. And then we end up like, as soon as we're finished, we, are back in love, madly in love. And like, why did we just do that? Why did we feel like we needed to do that? So yeah, no, it's definitely, something. And before we film now, and now that we're more aware of it, before we film or take any photos, we're like, let's do this with as much ease and grace as possible. I think because both of us, we don't love doing it. We don't love, we don't love it. It takes a lot of time and we don't love it. We'd much rather, be in the moment than thinking about, oh, we got to do this, or, and so I think that's why we get a little bit impatient, but it's funny. We laugh at it now.
Well, it's interesting. As an online influencer and somebody with a podcast, an author, you kind of have to do the social media thing these days. It would be kind of weird. You don't have to. I can think of one example, somebody that's been on the podcast twice, Cal Newport. He doesn't have any social media, and he's a profound author and has quite the following online. But it is so rare. I mean, it's an opportunity to connect with a community and to spread your message. So it's kind of like I know from my own experience, it's not a love-hate relationship, because I don't like the word hate, but it's, it's a love frustration. And it sounds like it's the same thing for you.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. It's like, I do everything in the book that I talk about. I set all the boundaries. I do all of that too, because I don't want to be attached to my phone. I don't want to be that statistic of 10 years of their life. Like, that doesn't feel good for me. So I'm very aware of it and love the platform. And I've got Cal Newport actually coming on my podcast, and I spoke a lot about it with him, about social media. And yeah, he's a New York Times bestselling author and has had no social media, and he's got a couple of kids. And, we spoke about that as well. And I said to him, what age do you think children should get phones? And because they're getting them, as young as like 5, like it's crazy. And he said 18. He said they should not have a smartphone until they're 18. Like, their brains are not developed. They do not need it. It's crazy. And I was joking with him that, my daughter, when she's born, Nick and I say she won't be getting a phone until she's 55. And realistically, that won't happen. But, presence is so important to me, being in the moment. And I talk about in the book as well how I had a therapy session and I felt so frazzled, and I walked into my therapist's office and she said to me, Melissa, you need to do more things that make you forget to look at your phone. And I thought at the time, well, what are those things? And now I know what those things are. Like, just on the weekend, I had a beautiful lunch with my girlfriends and we sat there for 4.5 hours and none of us picked up our phones. None of us, they were out of sight. They were away, and not one of us got up to look at a phone or to check the time, and 4.5 hours flew by. And so do more things that make you forget to look at your phone, that keep you in the present moment and bring you joy.
I love that. And it's interesting what you mentioned earlier when you were talking to, I think it was friends and family about their social media use. And even after they realized they weren't really happy with how much they were using it, when you went back later and talked to them again, they were still using it in a similar fashion. And I know, I'm guilty of it. And it sounds like you might be too. And it's like, even knowing about it, how it's not the healthiest thing and not something we want to be doing all the time, it's not enough to pull away and form a new relationship a lot of times.
Yes. Yeah. We do need to. I think that's where knowing what your values are, and I talk about values in the book, and knowing what your priorities are is really important, because for me, family is a core value. Connection is a core value. And so that's why in the book, I get you to work through what your core values are. Because when you know your core values, then you can go, okay, well, if my core value is friendship and connection and nature, and I'm spending 5 hours a day on my phone, is that in alignment with my core values? No, it's not. So that's, having that awareness is really important about what your core values are so that you can stay in alignment with them.
And I've thought of this from time to time too. And I think Cal, yourself, and me are probably around the same age. And I feel lucky that I grew up in a world without the social media. And it was, probably around age 18 or somewhere around there, talking about getting a phone around 18, that this stuff really started to, I think even later actually started to really, take a hold of the world in general. And now there's no guardrails. Parents have to be the guardrails, and unfortunately, by the sounds of it, that stat you shared about, was it the average person spending, is it 10 years on social media of their life?
6 years on social media, 10 years on their phone.
Got it. Okay, so both of those profound stats and very scary. So if the parent's doing that, like we talked about before, the parent has to set the example for the kids. So they're the guardrail here. And I just feel lucky that I grew up in the world I did. And I don't know if you feel the same.
100%. And Cal was saying to me that we're going to look back and think, why on earth did we give our 5-year-old a phone? Like, we are going to think back. But he also said, Melissa, your daughter is going to be born into a generation where they don't use the phones like we do now. It's going to be different for them. And, same with your daughter as well. It's going to be really different for them, which is great. It's just really great. But yeah, we're going to look back on the kids that are being raised now and the teenagers now and think, what were we thinking? Like, why on earth? It's like giving them cigarettes. Like, why would we do that? It's absolutely ludicrous. And like I said, their brains are not fully developed. They're not fully developed until they're 25. And it's just crazy to think that we're just putting these things in front of them and stunting their growth. And it's just wild.
Well, it seems like we're in a time right now where the boundaries are being tested, and we're hopefully at the extreme and noticing the detriment of using these tools in excess. And hopefully we can find a healthy middle ground. Like a lot of things in life, the boundaries need to be tested to find a healthy medium. And hopefully that's what's happening right now.
Exactly.
So earlier you talked about thinking social media was neutral. Now you have a different sense. You feel like it's more of something that's negative and kind of has a negative grip on us. And this reminds me of a documentary that I've seen, and I'm guessing you may have too, The Social Dilemma on Netflix. Is that something you've watched?
Yes, that is something I watched, which really did open my eyes. And it's not so much that it's negative, it's more, and that's not the word I use in the book. It's more that it has an agenda, and their agenda is to keep us on the platform for as long as possible, because that's how they make money. So they have the same tactics that they use in casinos to keep you addicted to their platforms.
It's definitely eye-opening.
And that's something that, I wasn't really aware of. I just thought it was a neutral tool, and how we used it was the most important thing. And that's what I first, was writing about in the book. I was like, it's a neutral platform and our intention matters, which it does, but it's how we use it. We can use it for the good, or we could use it for the not so good. And that's what I was saying. And then I saw this documentary and I was like, oh no, like that's not the case. Like they are monopolizing on our time and our addiction to it. And, I still, knowing that, I still want to use the platform. I just want to use it in a way that feels in alignment and feels good for me.
It'll be interesting because we are still relatively in the early days of social media. I mean, over the next 10, 15 years, especially with movies like this out there, and from people I've talked to, it seems like this movie was watched by a lot of people. So it'll be interesting to see, now that people are getting a taste of what really is happening behind the scenes, how social media evolves and pivots over the upcoming years.
Absolutely. It's going to be really eye-opening to see that.
And Melissa, one area of your book, well, a lot of it I found very interesting. I love the book, but one area I want to talk about, which ties into social media, is the influencer section. And you talk about how, in the realm of influencers, you're a small fish compared to some of the other ones out there. But as an influencer, somebody who is, working with brands and posting different products and stuff like that, at times, you gave us a behind the scenes look at what this world is like. And I'd love for you to give us a taste of that and talk about what you've seen being in that world.
Yeah, it's so important. It's really important that we know this stuff because, it is a whole world. Being an influencer is a job. And this means that influencers are careful about what they select and what they share. Like I said before, it's like an architect and their resume, you know? Excuse me. And I talk about a couple of strategies in the book. I give a couple of power strategies to help people understand that these influencers are, it's easy to compare ourselves to them because they can seem like they're quote unquote like similar to us, where maybe we don't compare ourselves so much to Brad Pitt and these big celebrities because we, rationalize in our brain that, oh, they have personal chefs and they have personal trainers and, cleaners and all these sorts of things that help them achieve what they have achieved in their life. However, it's easier to compare to an influencer because we perceive them as more similar to us. Maybe they're the same age or, you know, similar in some way. But we have to remember that that is their job and they are selective about what they share. So, one of the power strategies is understanding the tricks of the trade. And remember that influencers usually have professional photo shoots with lighting and hair and makeup and savvy camera angles and loaned wardrobes and airbrushing and things like that. So we need to understand that those images that look like, oh, I've just woken up, they're usually professional photo shoots. And that's okay, but we have to remember that, right? And then the next one I spoke about before is like that zooming out. Zooming out, this picture perfect image isn't always just rainbows and butterflies. Like you don't see what's on the outside of the image. Like say you're looking at an image of a beautiful chocolate coconut tart or something and you don't see the mess everywhere and the toddler having a tantrum in the background and the mum that's taking the photo, it's got chocolate all over her. Like you don't see all of that. So that's something else that we need to remember. And then something else that really helps me is like to remember that these pictures, like it's not actually real life. Like you're looking at a screen, it's not real. Like, and whenever, you're looking at the screen and you're comparing yourself to this influencer and feeling like comparing yourself and feeling bad about yourself, like go and revel in the realness of your own life. Like go and get out into nature and feel what you can feel and smell what you can smell and sense what you can sense, and get back to that realness of your own life, because then that's when you come back to the present moment and where the magic happens.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. You never know when there might be a hangry husband and a patient husband and stepson waiting 2 hours to get the perfect photo, right?
Exactly.
So, Melissa, when writing this book, did you find that there's certain areas or certain groups of the population that are more susceptible to comparison in a negative way?
I feel like from the data, women have between 60 and 80,000 thoughts a day. Men have around 40,000. So women statistically will do it more, but that doesn't make men exempt from it. They still do it as well. So definitely, the women, and then it just doesn't discriminate. It's as young as 6 years old and goes all the way up. From the data, it shows like there's it just no age is the particular age. However, in saying that, people who have heavy social media usage tend to compare a lot more than others. Because, you think about it, when we were growing up, we didn't have social media. And so we may have compared ourselves to Rachel and, Sarah in our class. And Rachel was really good at netball and I wanted to be as good as her at netball and I wasn't. And maybe Sarah, because she was really smart, or whatever it was. Like we weren't exposed to it as much as we are now. So now, with that heavy social media usage, you would have hundreds of people, that some people follow like 3,000 people, and some people follow like 20 people. And so I think, we need to be really mindful of that as well. I talk about it in the book, like follow people that light you up, that are inspiring, that make you feel good about yourself. Don't follow people just for the sake of it. Follow people because it makes you feel good and is inspiring to you. Don't just click follow because you think you should, or it's because it's your cousin. If your cousin is negative and makes you contract and doesn't feel good about you don't feel good about yourself, then you can just unfollow. Like, it's your choice. You don't have to stay there if you don't want to.
And what are some of the big things that we're getting caught up comparing to? I can assume it's looking at other people and their physical appearance, maybe vacations that they're on, just looking at maybe their socioeconomic status and things like that, homes and parenting. I want to actually talk about parenting after we pivot off this, but talk about some of the things that are common that we're getting caught up into in a negative way to compare.
Yeah, you mentioned quite a few of the most popular ones. Body image is the number body image is number one for sure. That is the biggest one. And then career wise, like where I'm at in my career, what I'm doing for my career, how high up am I in my job, how much I earn, that sort of thing. Materially, so like possessions, homes, cars, that sort of thing. Parenting definitely is another one. They're like the most common. Oh, and relationships. So am I single? Am I in a relationship? Their relationship looks so perfect, that sort of thing. So they're like the main ones.
Let's dip into parenting because again, you're a stepmom and about to become a parent again, and I'm a relatively new parent, and we are navigating this new world as parents largely because of social media, where in the past we would just be comparing to maybe, some other cousins in our life and friends and now it's like there's so much on social media with kids and babies and there's so much clothing and toys and different things that you can get caught up in comparing what you're providing for your child versus other parents. So, what did you come across doing the research for this book and how do we navigate that in a healthy way?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's such a common area. Like you don't realize it until you start looking at it, just how big this world of comparison and parenting is. Like it is huge. And it comes down to things like, oh, I don't have those toys for my child, and my child's going to be left behind, and whatever, to um, why is their child so well behaved and mine not, things like that. And I think the most important thing is that we have to stop shaming other parents and shaming ourselves. You know, it's not nice and it's fueling our comparisonitis. So the next time you find yourself judging another parent, ask yourself, like, what might be going on behind the scenes that has led them to make that decision? And remember, unless you are witnessing like an actual instance where a parent is like screaming at a child in the middle of the shopping center or whatever, like you don't know what is going on for that family. Like we have no idea. And so we need to stop shaming other people and remember that we're all on our own parenting journey and we're all doing our very best. And it takes a lot to be a parent, and it's a big job. It's the most beautiful thing, and it's the most growth growth inducing thing that we can go through. You'll be shown all of the areas that you need to look at and to work on within yourself. And so I think the shaming has to stop. That really is one of the biggest things, shaming others and shaming ourselves.
Yeah,
And then
let's
the
talk more
guilt.
about shaming ourselves. I think that's important to talk about. You share in the book comparing your bananas to other people's blueberries. So, we're all human and we all have good days and bad days, and kids have good days and bad days. So we could use the example of like being at a restaurant and maybe one of our children's having a meltdown, that being a banana, versus there's some other families in the nearby area, and you see all these other well-behaved kids and families. It's like, that might just be a good day for them. We can't compare our bad days to other people's good days. That's what I'm getting at.
Exactly. So, yeah, I talk about comparing your bananas to someone else's blueberries, and the blueberries being those blissful moments when your children are just so easy and just so blissful. And then the bananas are when, yeah, they're having a tantrum and you think, oh my goodness. And you don't know how many banana moments they've had that day. You don't know how many blueberry moments they've had that day. And it's actually none of our business. And we just have to remember that we're all doing the very best that we can. And that is just so important, to let go of that shame. That shame, the shaming of women, the shaming of anyone is just, it is detrimental, it's unhealthy, and not serving anyone. And then it leads to guilt, that guilt that a lot of women feel, mums and dads. And so that guilt and shame are just two of the most unnecessary things that and unnecessary energies that we engage in. They don't serve anyone. Shame and guilt do not serve anyone. Brené Brown talks a lot about shame in her research, and just it does not serve anyone. So don't try and compare your blueberries to someone else's bananas or vice versa, and just become aware of when you're shaming and when you're feeling guilty, and choose to let them go. I'm just going to let this go. It just doesn't matter. I'm doing my best.
And then tying it back to social media again, remembering that most of the things you're going to see from others posted there are going to be blueberries. So you don't want to compare your bananas throughout your day to their blueberries.
Exactly. You see the perfect images when they're in Europe and all three kids are sitting there eating their ice cream in their white linen clothes, and they haven't got 1 ounce of ice cream on their clothes. And you think, how are they so well behaved and they don't look like a mess, And it just, that was 1 minute, 1 second in time,
One
and
snippet.
one snippet in time. And there's just, remember that, because you can't compare. You have no idea what happened after that moment. You have no idea. You know, there may have been a tantrum. There may have been, I don't know, but we just don't know. So we can't make these assumptions that their life is quote unquote perfect. We just can't do that to ourselves anymore. It's detrimental to our mental health.
And Melissa, I know I got to let you go. I really appreciate you taking the time so close to delivering your new baby. Just wishing you guys all the best and so happy for you guys.
Thank you so much. You're so beautiful. And I've loved our chat. And please go and grab the book at melissaambrosini.com and grab yourself a copy of Comparisonitis. And there's some epic bonuses when you get it. And come and check out my podcast, The Melissa Ambrosini Show. And on Instagram, I am Melissa at Melissa Ambrosini. And come and DM me and tell me what you got out of this episode. I would love to hear so much. I love hearing what your takeaways are from these types of conversations. So please come and share it with me. And thank you for listening. And thank you, Jesse, for holding space.
Thank you. And connecting on social media in that way is just such a beautiful, healthy way to use the platform. And if there's anything else you decide you want me to link up in the show notes, let me know. And again, just wishing you guys all the best. Love the new book. And Melissa, keep doing great things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jesse.